There's the competitive balance between being financially well run and being competitive. When you're in an environment where everyone is increasing spend and everyone is out for the best players, you have to compete. This year we had 2-player sales, and unfortunately for championship clubs, that is the only way you can build sustainability from a P&L point of view as it stands. Unfortunately, some people like to pick up on us as a negative, and we know that we're a brand that people will enjoy kind of attacking. And now it's like, let's be brave, let's put our head above the parapet. If they want to attack us, you can attack us and go, I remember such and such on Panorama in the 70s, and go, get over it. That was 40 years ago. There's a lot of things that we do as a club that are the right thing to do. We just need to be proud of it. Don't go, we can't talk about it because people throw hooliganism from the 1980s or throw this match at us from whenever it was. We've got to acknowledge that people will always use that until you change that mindset and prove enough times that what we do is something special. And we've probably not shouted enough because we've been embarrassed that people will attack it. And actually, we shouldn't be. Let's just keep showcasing what we do.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Business of Sport.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Look, I'm going to go straight back to what we were just discussing before we came on air and say I'm really excited because we have a top-level executive with a finance background at a business where we talk about the finances of sport for,
brilliant.
for the majority of it. Well, exactly. I mean, look, there's no better place to start than understanding that background. How's that impacted how you kind of operate?
Oh, it makes a huge difference. I mean, in the championship, all of us consistently lose money. So we're all solely reliant on the goodwill of our ownership groups. And having that background to actually look and challenge on financial assumptions, look at ways we can, especially on a cost basis, look at how we can keep our costs under some form of control and discipline. It's so important. And you need that, I think, that discipline and that mindset to just sometimes temper the excitement, especially when it comes to players, to go, this is the impact. This will be the impact from a cash perspective, from a P&L perspective, obviously from a regulatory point of view with profit and sustainability or financial fair play. So actually understanding those rules that come in, because these are kind of strict rules that are in place to control our behavior, and we need to make sure that we understand them. So having that kind of background gives you that a little bit of, I suppose, perhaps a head start just in terms of understanding them.
How does football compare to the other sports you've worked in? You've done time in rugby. You've also spent time in Formula E.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I suppose the market for football is so much more. The potential is so much more. And obviously, you look at rugby, you could go from being, again, in the UK, you haven't really got a huge market for it. You haven't got a huge variety between the biggest and the smallest clubs. Whereas in football, you can go from non-league up to Premier League, and that's 200 million difference in turnover, and even more when you then get into the European competitions. I think that the finances are so much more stretched in football in terms of the variety between the bigger and the smaller clubs, but also it is an incredibly competitive landscape, which is something that's really important. Whereas rugby union is pretty much a closed sport at the moment, no relegation and promotion, or very limited. And Formula E, again, it's 11 teams. So there's barriers to entry for new entrants. And also you are trying to build your own product separate from other motorsports areas.
You know, the finances of football clubs, of course, as the name of the show suggests, things we talk about all the time. And you know, profit is not a word that we ever really hear. Sustainability is a word we hear quite a lot, but it's often in the guise of sustainability while losing money, which, you know, in the essence of the term is not sustainable. What's the performance of Millwall financially been like over the last few years?
I think we've always had one of the, I suppose, smaller losses in the championship. So we've always been seen as being well run. And I think that's obviously something that's been in place for the last probably 10, 15 years. But what we're seeing is obviously as there's the competitive balance between being financially well run and being competitive. And obviously when you're in an environment where everyone is increasing spend and everyone is out for the best players, you have to compete. So the last couple of years, our losses have increased. We've still got, when you look at the rules we operate in, we've got significant headroom. This year, we've had a couple of player disposals, so it may be our first profit in probably at least 20 odd years this year as a book profit. Obviously, that doesn't kind of correspond to a cash profit, but actually from a year one of kind of our new approach, actually to have a book profit will be a huge achievement, but it also reflects the fact that we had 2-player sales. And unfortunately for championship clubs, that is the only way you can build sustainability from a P&L point of view as it stands at the moment.
We call it the football lottery all the time on here, because it's the things I guess you can't plan for at the start of a season, right? You're not going to build your budget around selling some players and being able to.
So I'm sure some clubs do, but
which is part of the problem.
Yeah, because and you see some clubs make a business of it. Obviously, there's other clubs we talk to who've got 80, 90, 100 million of sales of their academy players over the last 15, 20 years. And you can see that that's something that they build in, and they know that they'll lose that talent. For us, it's very much we're on a slightly different journey to them. We know that that's part of our model, but at the same time, we want to reinvest and always look at building back better so that we can keep pushing up the table.
Because last year, it was 21.4 million revenue against 19.4 million loss, operating loss. We talk all the time, again, about owner financing and how you make that sustainable, but also trying to remove the reliance on the individuals who own the club financially and create a business, if they weren't there, that would still be able to stand on its feet. Frighteningly, you mentioned that you're in a better position, or should we say a better performing club than a lot of clubs in the championship, but that's still a huge loss.
Yeah, it's nothing to be proud of to say you're kind of one of the better ones out of a group when you're still losing 20 million. And for us, that was a big reason for a lot of changes we made as a club last year. And obviously, one of the reasons I was asked if I'd come back. And when I was asked, it was one of those questions you think for about 3 seconds ago, yes, of course I will. Because you can see the potential, and also as a club, we're very lucky. We've got a family that have been involved with the club for over 15 years now. It's a big part of their lives. And we were over in Boston at the end of the season and spending time with James, who's our chairman, and his mother, obviously, who was the wife of our former chairman, who passed 2 years ago. And actually, it's a family interest. They've all got a vested interest in the club's success, but also they've put significant amounts of money in during this time to keep us competitive, to keep us going. And actually, my job, and not just my job, the other senior team at the club, it's our job to build some sustainability, build some improvements in there so that actually we reduce our reliance. If we can reduce that going forward, if we can get that to 50% of previous levels, then it's a comfortable position that actually, if we then choose to spend more on players or spend more on facilities improvement, it's a conscious decision rather than having to choose between paying the bills or buying a player or investing in the infrastructure.
You just had a really great season, right? Finished 8th in the championship, nearly made the playoffs. If we can say
2 minutes in the playoffs.
2 minutes in the playoffs, but not far off at all. How much does the performance on the pitch impact the success of the business?
Obviously, they're inextricably linked. Obviously, we saw it as the season went on with Alex Neil coming in. Obviously, we picked up form, and obviously that drives a lot of interest from fans, so that drives attendances. We saw that with season ticket renewals for next year, our record level of season ticket sales in our early bird window, which sets us up for success next year. And hopefully that then obviously will dovetail into what we're doing this summer in terms of kind of the player recruitment that we're working through at the moment. But what you need to try to do, and what every club's trying to do, is how do you, I suppose, de-risk from success on the pitch directly impacting on attendances, directly impacting on sponsorship. That's a really difficult challenge, and that's not just for championship clubs, that's across the league. You look at clubs in the Premier League, and it is still linked to success. Obviously, that will drive TV revenues, that will drive sponsorships. And for us, it's what can we do that is a bit different from others? How can we actually take a risk, do something that's probably not seen as being very Millwall-y, to actually go, well, we'll try something, we'll try a new product, we'll try something that actually it might work. If it doesn't work, we learn from it, we learn at the parts that work, and we do something different. But I've said to everyone, let's take risks, let's try and do something different now, because if you do the same thing, you get the same result.
You just said something there that's brilliant, but I'd love to understand what you really mean by it. You said very Millwall-y.
Yeah, I mean, we're seen as being obviously one of the smaller clubs in the league, and people say, well, it's quite traditional. We don't do this, we don't do this. And especially from people on the outside will attack us with normally fairly kind of limited blinkered views on us based on what's happened in the 70s and 80s. And actually, it's when we say to everyone, come and see what we do, come and see the stuff we do in the community, come and see the fact that we are trying to do things differently from a kind of other peers within the championship. And I think that's when people don't expect that from us, because we've probably been seen as a fairly safe bet, a fairly stable club that doesn't try and rock the boat. And it's like, let's have some fun. Let's try some different things and see what sticks.
Because if you look at your business or the business of football clubs in the championship, you've got some revenue streams that are in your control and that you can build independently. You've got others that you benefit off, should we say, centralized pillars. So things like media, right, and the distribution that comes from the EFL. How are you managing both of those when it comes to the creativity, I guess, as you said, that you can work with, but also then, knowing that you've got the nice thing, which is a guaranteed source of revenue coming from central body?
Yeah, I mean, that central revenue, we obviously understand it straight at the start of the year. We know what that, obviously our obligations are on there. We know what that, I suppose, limits us in terms of where we can do our own thing. But then where we've got kind of market segments that aren't covered by central contracts with the EFL or whoever, let's look at what we can do there, and let's look at how we can kind of, I suppose, exploit them for the benefit of the club. And that is, it may be driving revenues, it could be driving fan engagement, it could be driving even things like social media valuations. So one of the things that we've put in place this year is tracking the valuation of our social media, because that will be important in the future when it comes to propositions to potential partners and sponsors to go, this is the value of what we put out as a business. This is how we can prove the return on investment for you. And again, from working in a different sport last year, where there's not that emotional attachment to the sport, everything was very scientific in terms of the value you're receiving for any euro you're putting into the sport. You need to be getting X back. And so we're starting to look at how we actually deliver the same sort of information that sponsors could ask for, because again, that's something that will flow through the market. And if we can demonstrate that we can give a good return on any investment, then it puts us in a stronger position than anyone else.
As a portion of that 21 odd million, how influential is commercial as a percentage?
I suppose it's what you call commercial. So commercial, I would call ticketing, hospitality, and then through to sponsorship, advertising. And that is, that's at least probably, match day would probably be about a third, central about a third, and then commercial and other activities probably about a third again.
And developing it now, do you see sponsors, partners, companies that are building those relationships with you? Do you see them looking at success in different ways? How they're measuring what they're getting from you? Yeah,
I think we're very lucky. We've got a mixture of local partners who are fans, as well as obviously some larger brands. So Mike Guava being our new principal partner for this season. Obviously, their financial services. So for them, it's very much about brand awareness. But we've been able to obviously understand what they want to actually deliver back in terms of how we deliver the sponsorship rights and how we promote their brand and how we work with them. And I think that's a learning curve for all clubs, is actually asking, rather than saying, do you want to be on the front of our shirt? You will get 4 tickets in our hospitality. You'll get this, this, and this. It's flipping that conversation to go, what do you want out of this? Yeah. And I think that's a very different mindset. And it's one that Luke, who's our chief commercial officer, has really driven into the team over the last 18 months or so. And it's vital, because I think the days of just going out to someone and going, give me X and I'll give you Y, they're gone.
And the performance side, when you're finishing, I guess, higher up the league, it's always great. You can go back and you can go, look, we're delivering here in places that, we're either happy or not with. And if you're not, then you're still building off a solid level of performance on.
Completely. There's obviously, you get things like more televised games. You obviously get higher interest. You'll get more press coverage. You'll obviously get a higher, I suppose, a penetration rate of any social media. So it's all self-fulfilling in that respect.
I realised I probably fell into the maybe slightly Millwall-y reflection in how I was talking about your season, because I said it was a great season. And, but that's jumping the gun a little bit, because you may say, no, do you know what, Charlie? We really wanted to be in the playoffs. We thought we should be. And so just in that, how do you view the success or disappointment of the last year? Yeah,
I mean, I think for all of us, with the way the season ended and the run of form we took into the last third of the year, I think everyone was over the moon. I think we had a decent start. we actually saw a change in performance under Neil Harris. He changed the way we were playing. We were scoring more goals. Middle of the season, we had a bit of a dip. Obviously, Neil decided to leave, which was obviously it's disrupting. It was obviously a real challenge for us. But because of the time we'd had with him and because of his time with the club, it was actually one that he gave us plenty of notice so we could actually look at how we built back from there. Alex came in. It took him a bit of time to hit the ground, but actually towards the end of the season, I think we were pretty much the form team, which is really, really positive going into next season. And one of the things, the big challenges for Neil and for Alex this year was last year we had the oldest squad in the league. And it's one of those things that we have to make sure, and it's one of the challenges we're working on for next season, is we need to have that balance between senior players with a number of appearances in the Championship especially, and younger, hungrier players. You look at Sunderland, for example, 2 years ago, really struggled with the youngest squad in the league. Last season, promoted through the playoffs. So you can see that actually once you've built that resilience in there, it's there. We had to address the fact that our average starting average match day 20 last year was the oldest by some way in the Championship. Great for experience, but obviously you can't then go toe to toe with a Sunderland who are 5 years average younger, with a lot of a lot more pace and a lot more kind of dynamism in the way they're playing. So that was a big challenge at the start of the year. We've changed that with the player recruitment, and we're starting to see that paying off. We're starting to see a big batch of exciting players coming through our academy, but also that we've signed this year. And that's part of our kind of strategy for how we're going to succeed going forward.
Because you've been in the Championship now 9? Is it 9?
Yeah,
9-ish?
Since 16, 17, I think, when we were promoted through the playoffs.
So I guess it is to that point where you build an amazing group of players probably around that who now have huge experience within that environment, but you need to keep trying to add to it in the right ways to push for what you want to hopefully progress towards.
Yeah, and obviously that's using a lot more science all the way through the club as well. So we're using a lot more data to help with decision making. But a big part is looking at the types of players that we're bringing in, going, actually, you do need not somebody who's played 700 games for Millwall, actually going, well, somebody who's played 300 games in the Championship will know what the Championship is. That player's worth their weight in gold. But the problem is there's 24 of us all looking, going, we want that player. And there's probably a few Premier League clubs also looking. So it then gets competitive, which also then means we have to spend more. And this year we've spent record levels on new players.
What is it roughly?
It'd be over 10 million in total, which for a Championship club is significant. We broke our transfer record twice this year, but that's from a much lower basis than others. Obviously, you see some clubs in the Championship with boom and bust.
And League One.
And League yes. So unfortunately, that's still less than maybe one club's paid on one player. But for us, that is significantly more than we've ever spent. But that's with recycling a few players through, but also the need to actually bring in talent that will serve us for now, serve us for next year, and serve us, hopefully, as part of our plan to get in the Premier League.
And are you making those calls on transfer spend as a result of the market that you're trading in? I'd imagine, having to sign off on this, you're looking at what it does to the wider business. How tough are those decisions when making a call whether to push the button or not, I guess, on a deal, but also on the continuation of that deal, remembering that I'd imagine wages and the whole package is often a lot more than what that initial number is.
Yeah, it is obviously difficult. They're big numbers and you do obviously work through the impact. But again, I think one of the things that works really well is our director of football, who joined when I joined, and the chairman and myself spent a lot of time going through that, plotting it through, understanding the implications of any decision. And actually, we've got a couple of deals that are progressing very well at the moment. And actually, we go in with our eyes wide open. The chairman understands the implications, and it's my job to go, look, this is the impact on cash now. And actually, it may be that if we can't negotiate that term for that date, there's a cash obligation from the family on this date. But actually, that's just probably bringing it forward 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah. So there's a lot of thought that goes into, I suppose, how a deal's structured to mitigate any additional cash calls outside of our original plan.
What's the transfer process? For fans, it seems like we wait on Twitter X or other social sites for, said journalists to be breaking big news, and then suddenly you get quite a quick often turn around to either deal being done or not. For you, as chief exec or managing director, what's the process like before a deal actually gets to you or a player comes to you? What work goes on behind the scenes to identify?
Yeah, I mean, our targets, we identified, some of them we've identified for the last year. So it's obviously looking at those that we would be targeting this summer. So there's a lot of data work. So I think it will initially be the searches, the data searches, and then onto video scouts, then onto physical scouts. So there's probably 30, 40 pieces of evidence for each of our key targets as it stands at the moment. And then it will be into, right, let's start pushing the deal, approaching the clubs. But then every single point is a negotiation. You can't move for having to negotiate just on, obviously, the total amount and then the payment terms and then the contingencies. But then it may be, we don't want that contingency. Well, I want this much more in this amount. How about if we change the payment terms? If you pay us this, we'll reduce that. So even just to get an agreement with the club is a lot of toing and froing, because again, different clubs have different requirements in terms of when they need the cash, how they want to report it. And then you're into the negotiations with the player and his representatives. And that is very much the same sort of thing of going, obviously there's 1,000 different kind of boxes to tick, and once everything's in agreement, and some are easy, some it's a case of, especially now, we had a few in January, we signed 8 players in January, we had a very busy January transfer window, but a lot of it was born out of, with Romain Esse leaving us to Crystal Palace, a lot of players, he spoke to a lot on our behalf and said, what's going on here is really good. It's really positive. Actually, the club's moving in the right direction and they're doing a lot of work on it, the infrastructure. They're doing a lot of work. They're gearing for success. So that was a big thing in getting people, I suppose, selling us to players. Because again, it's like anything. You're going to a new employer. You need to understand if it's the right fit for you. You need to understand the right culture and what your workplace is going to be like. So having a player leaving us, going to the Premier League, but a massive advocate for his time from being 12 years old all the way through with us, has paid dividends massively.
And is the plan always, if you have a sale like that, to ensure that you invest a significant portion of that back into the playing squad?
Yeah, and that's what we did in January. We bought, obviously, a lot of the players we bought were probably earlier than we would have planned, but they're invested in for success, and hopefully this coming season will be breakout seasons for a number of them. But we did also then break our transfer record going to Europe to replace with Negley, who unfortunately got injured as the season went on, but again we'll be back in pre-season, and I think everyone's really excited what he will bring to us.
I mean, balancing the new signings with what you've got in a team, I guess, is you bring 8 players in. Is that a real challenge for a manager at the same time as it is a great opportunity to make sure that you maintain those values within a team? I think
it is a challenge when there's so many. One of them was returning. He'd been with us as a youth player before going to Glasgow Rangers, but then came back. And again, that was a big coup for us in terms of, and he was really keen to come back, rejected an offer from Rangers to come back to us. So we had that kind of, I suppose, inbuilt goodwill from players already, but also with a new manager, he was instilling his way of working. He wanted to instill kind of his vision for success, which having new players come in helps to just refresh that. And actually everyone in effect is in a new environment with a new manager who came in literally just before the transfer window. So actually I think that timing probably worked quite well for us, just in terms of building those relationships, but also then, thankfully, we turned a corner in January in form. Had a couple of brilliant results against teams that we're probably looking at going, if it goes wrong, we're in and around those areas. And then, we just went on a fantastic run. And
how do you find the communications when you sell a major asset, you sell a great player that you have naturally to a Premier League team? So there's always the case to fall back on of just career progression, but obviously to a major rival as well. Communications with fans is always key. How does that kind of fall into your thinking when making these business decisions and ensuring that, I guess, you can mitigate the fallout, if we want to call it, as much as you can?
And it's a difficult one. We've had it recently, obviously, with some of the players leaving us at the end of the season. We've made contract offers, but again, when players are out of contract, it's very difficult to when we value their contract for the future seasons. It's up to them. It's obviously their career that they're choosing for. So those are difficult ones, and obviously we unfortunately, like everyone, you spend far too long on Twitter. On the train in the morning, I'm on for an hour, and I probably spend 3/4 an hour of it looking at Twitter going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then you just go, actually, let's cut through the chatter. And obviously people post things on Twitter without fear of consequence. But we're conscious that we need to be as open and transparent as we can. However, you can't always say to people, we're just about to sign X and Y, because we do that, and then everyone in the world and his wife know about it, and then the next thing you know, he's signing for another club. So I think for us, it's trying to get that out there quickly. But one of the things that obviously on the football side, our director of football is we've had him talk to fans a number of times. We've put I suppose we've put out videos so that he can talk to the fan group and say, look, this is what we've been doing. This is reflecting back on each transfer window. But then also, it's just simple things like, and we never ever did it when I was here previously, but we're signing a player 15 minutes before we announce it. Let's send a note out to all the staff, even as long as it's out beforehand, because that's what we were finding was actually probably the worst thing, was fans would obviously find out instantaneously. And if you're doing it during the middle of the day, they're then phoning, say, the ticket office, talking to a member of staff who has no idea we've signed a player. I mean, it just makes us look dysfunctional. So it's a big thing of sharing that news to the staff. And that's something I've put in place a lot of this year, is talking to all the staff about how we're doing as a business. We've got our first ever annual conference in 2 weeks, which is
bringing all the staff together.
Yeah, from all of our site and our community trust, and it will be reflecting back on last year, but it will be showing them this is where we're at financially, looking forward to next year's budget, reflecting back on KPIs from last year, which is our first ever year of doing them, but actually just being as transparent as we can be, going, this is the targets and measures for success for next season. This is where we're going to aim for. This is how many points we want to amass on the board in the championship. And that's all set out now for the next 5 years in terms of how we're going to build for success. And then kind of actually talking to the staff about our business model in a lot more detail, so that everybody understands. And I think that's the right thing. It's like when you're cloak and dagger with staff, how can that motivate people to actually share in kind of the common goals? Thinking
about that in the future, and transfers and being better business in general, how do you prepare for the new kind of squad costs player ratio, 85% of revenue, being obviously now a much, much more influential part of how companies and clubs are really going to be able to run in the league?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I think like probably all of us have been doing the same thing. You've been scenario planning through, looking at the current squad, looking at headroom we've got. So we know what the headroom is based on, I suppose, a couple of different scenarios with our own business model. But then for us, it's very much, how do we keep growing those revenues? What are the other income streams that we can bring in that we perhaps haven't looked at before? Even if they're not going to bring in, they're not going to solve world hunger, they're going to bring in small incremental amounts, but can we do 10 of those? All of a sudden has a material impact. And then longer term for us is around our property development and our new sustainable income stream that will bring in, that will give us hopefully a sustainable competitive advantage against the clubs we're competing against.
Would you say it's pushed you to look at different things quicker than maybe you would have done?
No, I think it's something I've said to everyone from day one of coming in. Let's try different things. Let's look at new partnerships. Let's look at things that will unlock revenue. So this year we had a new partner and in effect we contracted a lot of their partnership revenue with new floodlight installation. That was needed. That was long overdue needed as an infrastructure improvement. But again, on one side, we've got a capital spend. One side, we've got an income stream. So actually, for us, it's enhanced what we've got. It's improved our match experience, because our lights are almost now ready for the Premier League. Obviously, we've got additional lights to put in when we get there. But at the same time, everything's built that we can just bolt on a few extra lights rather than, and again, I think looking at, say, Luton Town last season, the amount had to spend in the Premier League to obviously get Kenilworth Road Premier League ready. So let's look at that as one challenge in itself. How do we get the Den so that it's as good as it can be to go on day one of the Premier League, but also how do we do that in the rest of the business? And then how can we do that in a way that actually is a bit more not creative, because that always uses a negative word in finance, but how do we actually do things that are not just simple, we'll go and purchase from you and then we'll hope you'll buy something back. It's like, let's look at how we actually drive new income streams on that.
What makes lights Premier League ready? wattage?
Pretty much,
Number
Is it? It's obviously the lux levels all the way through the pitch. So ours were 30 odd years old. So even for the championship, what we were finding was obviously they're deeply inefficient, costing a fortune in electricity. People having to go up there week in, week out to replace bulbs. The bulbs are getting more expensive and harder to source. And the fear was we'll be on eBay in a few months bidding against, I don't know, some random club in Holland or something for 40-year-old bulbs from another stadium just to keep replenishing what we've got. So it was a case of obviously that's a big thing for broadcast as well, because the higher the strength of the bulbs, obviously it helps with things like the LED boards. It stops the flickering. So it's helped reduce that. But also it just means that when we're promoted, we just put the extra lights on. Obviously, that will be needed for VAR and all of those things that are those hidden costs of promotion. But having it so that it's, I suppose, we're 70% of the way there, and then it's bolt on the additionals when we are there.
You touched a major way of building income and increasing the wider business value is the infrastructure.
Yes.
You have an amazing historic ground. And as we've seen across football, these are often quite vulnerable when it comes to looking at how you really develop a lot of the business lines in the club that may be slightly away from the performance. What's happening at the club around the Den and looking at how you're trying to develop, I guess, the infrastructure at your disposal?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably two things on that. One is, at the moment, there are no hospitality suites, there are no offices, there is no facilities on two of our floors in the main stand because they are completely being redeveloped, ready for the new season. So we've obviously launched that with our current hospitality season ticket holders as renewal products, and then that will go out there to the market. But I think probably next week actually. But that's obviously for us giving a wider range of different hospitality products, new office space, which will be open plan to allow for better collaboration between all the teams. And that's just modernising the facilities that haven't been modernised since they were built in the early 90s. But then wider to that is obviously the development of the land around the Den, which is something that for anyone who follows the club it's been a moot point until a couple of years ago. It was obviously quite a disruptive part of the club's history when there was fighting with Lewisham Council. But we are progressing well on a new lease, which will be 1,000 years, which will give us the right to develop. And for that, it's looking at the best development that will give the club a sustainable income stream, but also enable us to keep expanding the facilities as there's a business case, but in a whole new development site in that part of London, which will be vast. I think we're talking up to 7,000 new apartments, obviously public realm space, facilities for that community. Yeah. And it's going to be a big part of London development. And we're at the heart of it. And actually, we need to be leading on a lot of that with the people around us. And these are people that 5-6 years ago we were fighting. Actually, big part of this last year has been, let's build those relationships back. Let's look at how we can work together. Let's look at ways that we can actually build this and so have something that for a club we can be proud of and for our fans and the community to be proud of.
So we're not talking about building a new stadium.
No,
we're talking about developing.
Yeah, so the land
side,
around,
plus then the land around it.
But then that will need to dovetail into how we develop the stadium. Yeah. So that could be, we've got 4 separate stands. That could be using the corners, using, in effect, as other clubs have done, building above, building out. And that's all part of what we've got different architects looking at to make sure that when there's a business case allows, we can future-proof the stadium so that we can flex our capacity in line with what we need to do. And there's no point building it now and just going, well, we'll put an extra 10,000 seats and hope people come. I think that's a bit of a folly. So for us, it's let's make sure that we give everyone who's here today, give them the best we can, keep improving those facilities. And when there's demand, we will look at how we keep growing that.
What is demand like for tickets? Record season tickets, you just said, which is fantastic. Again, booked revenue, we love it from the business side, also fantastic from a fandom perspective because it just shows that increased, willingness to participate on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. How is the general demand at the moment based on the capacities that you have?
It's good. I mean, I think if you look at the home areas, we're over 80% utilised over the course of the season. What we do have a challenge with, and again, it's one that, especially this year with the new deal from the EFL with Sky, where we have fixtures being moved or midweek fixtures, we have quite a variance between a Saturday at 3 and Tuesday night at 7:45, and that's a challenge. And it's one that we've got. We're working with our CRM company and going, how do we solve for that? That's not a challenge that anyone's been able to solve, but let's look at ways we can just be more creative next year, because it's not fair on our season ticket holders who stick with us and show us all the loyalty. Then games are being disrupted and they can't attend. We need to make sure we find a way to make it as easy as for people to come as they can, but also they want to come. If we're playing a club on a Tuesday night in the middle of December, they want to come because actually we're putting on a good show. It's enjoyable, and hopefully we're up in the playoffs, and they can't help but want to come.
It's a catch-22, that, isn't it? Because you look at a media deal being improved and giving more money down the system, particularly in the Championship, and that's fantastic for you as a club. But then actually you look at what it means. And if it does mean shifting matches, if it means putting them at less convenient times for core fans, then it's taking revenue away from you in other areas. It's putting another part of the business under a bit more stress than it may have been. Net, how does it all come together, do you think?
I think we've tracked it through this year. And actually for the new TV deal, I think actually we were fairly lucky in terms of the mix of additional televised games. A lot more of them were away, but obviously that impacts on the number of fans who can travel, and obviously that could impact on obviously the atmosphere it builds, and that's difficult because obviously our travelling fans are as important as our home fans. But in terms of home games, we only had one additional game that was moved from a 3:00 kickoff, and then a further one that was moved because of our progress in the FA Cup. So actually, the impact was a lot less than we thought. However, it was some of the showcase games that were moved. We had a game moved to a Sunday afternoon, which again is a fairly rare occurrence. That impacts on people's ability to travel down. We had a game New Year's Day earlier. New Year's Day having a just after lunch kickoff, not great because obviously everyone's hungover and also everyone had work the following day. So obviously does impact on attendances, and even first and last game of the season being earlier for televised broadcast, that does impact on people's ability. If you've got kids, if you live outside of the den, you've got kids playing football or rugby on a Saturday morning, then trying to get in to watch a match, it is a challenge. So it's making sure that we're conscious of that. But then what can we do for the games at 3:00? Let's try and maximise the opportunity and actually make it as enjoyable as we can for people.
But before we continue with the show, we want to take an opportunity to thank our sponsor for the show, Revolut Business, the account designed to add efficiency to your business finances. Now, every business hits those big turning points when efficiency is the difference between make or break. Revolut Business makes your finances efficient, helping you manage team expenses, control spend, and expand into new markets, bringing everything you need into one place. Now, we heard on a recent show how Revolut have partnered with Manchester City Women to create cutting-edge partnerships, and I'm delighted to say they haven't stopped there. We've teamed up with them to offer a special offer for our listeners and viewers. And if you're new to Revolut Business, you're in luck. Open a Revolut Business account today using the link in this episode's description, add money to your account and get a £200 welcome bonus. Pay and get paid globally in over 30 currencies, automate your expenses, set custom card controls, and earn up to 3.51% annual interest paid daily, all on one platform. You'll be ready for whatever's next with this all-in-one account that's designed for efficiency and built for business. Click the link in this episode's description to sign up and get your £200 welcome bonus. This reward is only available until the 7th of July 2025, and T's and C's apply. Now, back to the show. Going back to not being Millwall-y as part of that, you did something pretty cool recently with mobile networks and being the first club. Well, actually, explain it properly because I'll probably ruin it.
Yeah, no.
But what happened with the mobile network?
Well, it was one of the things obviously our commercial guys were looking at. So it's a white label product sat on Vodafone 3, but in effect we badge it up and it links into, obviously we get some revenue share from there, but also we get the customer data, which is really important for us in terms of understanding the products that that fans want. I hate calling fans customers, but it goes into
everyone has an issue with it.
It is, and it's one that obviously it's a CRM system, so it's all geared around that. But for us, it's understanding fan behavior, because again, that will help us when we're going out to market in terms of looking at us as a brand and go, well, we've got X, Y, and Z as products. But also, it got such wide exposure, and it broke down a lot of the Millwall-y kind of misconceptions. I mean, The Sun wrote a huge article criticising it, saying, obviously, I think Barcelona were the first in Europe, and then us, and kind of, I suppose, trying to ridicule it slightly. But at the same time, they quoted the full press release, they quoted the details about the company, and actually, for them, brand awareness was brilliant.
Why would they do that? What's the negative?
I think it's just, unfortunately, some people like to pick up on us as a negative, and especially some media sources. I think they thrive on negativity, and it's a shame. They need probably a better hobby in their lives. But unfortunately, we know that we're a brand that people will enjoy kind of attacking. And actually, I've said, it's like now it's like, let's be brave. Let's put our head above the parapet. Let's do things, because if they want to attack us, you can attack us and go, well, I remember such and such on Panorama in the 70s, and go, get over it. That was 40 years ago. Look at what we're doing now. Look at the work we do in the community. Look at us as a club. Look at our fans. Actually, this is something special. And the fact that you keep throwing things up from the 80s, 70s, whenever it is, probably shows your own ignorance more than anything.
Can we properly talk about this? Because it's what makes part of this conversation so significant and different, which is that image and the brand perception of Millwall. You know, incredible fan base, but a fan base that hasn't had the best reputation over the years. Incredible club. Similar thing. When often fans have a bad reputation, it's put on the rest of the side of the club. But as you said, I'm even probably taking that off historical, growing up, hearing things. And once those opinions are formed, right, they're formed. It's very hard to shift it in people's minds. You have to proactively go out of your way to do that. How is this club changing? How has it changed now so that it is something, as you've said, that is not just, you know, something that you can be proud of, but it is a leading club, a leading sports team in a highly saturated industry where a lot of teams and clubs are actually quite similar.
Yeah. I think for us, and not just myself, but people previous to me, it's judge us by our actions, judge by what we do, not by your own view of what we are. So kind of a couple of good examples here. Since 2020, we've had an ED&I committee, and it's been something that before it was brought into the EFL's rules, we set up a committee. We've got a full-time ED&I officer who works between the club and the community trust. But that is because the community that we serve is so diverse in Southwark and Lewisham. Actually, we need to mirror that in terms of how we operate as a community asset. So actually, that's something that we've taken really seriously. And again, a lot of that has been born out of people having a misconception. And also there are incidents. We do have incidents. We will have those. But we have a zero tolerance policy. And we will say if there is an incident, and we'll put our hands up and go, yeah, we need to do better. And that's part and parcel of it. That's one thing. And then things like on environment sustainability, we've got a silver award in the EFL Green Club, and we're seen as one of the leaders in that. That's just what we do. We're not doing it for PR purposes. We're not doing it to kind of, I suppose, to win a new sponsor on X, Y, and Z. It's actually just what we do. There's a lot of things that we do as a club that are the right thing to do. And one of the things I've said to our staff this year is we just need to be proud of it. Don't shy away from it. Don't go, we can't talk about it because people throw hooliganism from the 1980s or throw this match at us from whenever it was. It's like we've got to acknowledge that people will always use that. And unfortunately, there's some clubs that will always have that association until you change that mindset and prove enough times that actually what we do is something special, and actually we go far and beyond other clubs because it's the right thing to do. And especially being in our local community, our community trust is such a big vital part of the club that we've probably not shouted enough because we've been embarrassed that people will attack it, and actually we shouldn't be. Let's just keep showcasing what we do because actually it's the right thing to do. And we need also people to know what we do because it increases the reach of the work we do in that community.
Yeah. But you are really, in essence, right, you're fighting an uphill battle when it comes to that, because everyone who will look at, by the sounds of what you've just said, particularly with reporting, they'll just look at it with a lens that is different to how they view other clubs. So a lot of those initiatives, you have to work that extra bit harder to make people realize why it's so influential and why it's important for you to do, whether right or wrong. That's just a reality.
It is. But I think if we put if 10 sources report the truth and the positive work we're doing, and one decides to keep reporting and peddling their kind of narrow-minded views, then eventually that gets drowned out by actually the truth and the positive stories. And for us, it's very much the good stuff we're doing. Let's be brave. Let's actually talk about it. Let's not shy away from it. And actually, when things don't go wrong, again, we front up and we go, look, if we don't do something right or there's an incident, we hold our hands up. But actually, like anything, we need to all learn from it. And obviously, there'll be incidents. We've got an FA charge at the moment, and that will be seen. That will be coming through in the next month or so. And that's a common one that a number of clubs have had.
Was that for the Mateta?
No, for the it was a Chelsea chant at Crystal Palace, and again, obviously West Ham have just been through that process. But for us, we will learn. We will take lessons, but also. And I implore the FA that we need to do more. That it needs to be a collective, not just throw a fine at a club and throw the book at us. What can we do as an FA? What can we do as an EFL around education? Because it's a precluded speech. And obviously, look, personally, I'm a gay man, and I have my own views on that as a speech. But it shouldn't be something that we get labelled as a homophobic club. We've got 2 gay football teams, which no other club in the EFL has got. And actually, it's something that we have not shouted about because it's just what we do. And I think that's something that I've said we need to sometimes not be. We just need to own it, own our mistakes, learn from it, move on. But if it's something like this that's a societal issue, let's look at what we can do to drive change, what we can do to drive education, because that's the only way that you can actually stamp it out. If you keep throwing books at clubs and keep punishing individuals, does that really change anyone?
And is that falling on the FA? Is that down to the individuals? I think
it's got to be a collective. I think it has to be a collective between clubs, between the leagues, between the FA, and it has to be a will to actually go, how can we mitigate this rather than how can we just keep punishing clubs? And again, this is my personal view, but I think it would be in a much better position if everyone worked together rather than blame. It's blame. We move on to the next one. If it feels bureaucratic, it feels like a right and wrong. How does anyone ever learn from it? It probably just doubles down those fans who've said it. And again, if we have to come out with a strong statement, how do you then move on from there and actually drive change? And I think it should be, perhaps it's wider than football. Perhaps it's looking at going, we're in a society at the moment where it's one view or another. We tend not to have, I suppose, a grey between black and white. And I think that's when we go, how do we get that back to where there was a little bit more, I suppose, common sense prevailing on things?
Well, it's football, as you said, it's not absolutely not just Millwall, right? Football just unfortunately seems to be a place where a lot of this can boil and come to the forefront, which is a problem for the sport, a massive problem, because it's such a popular thing.
But I think it's also because if you think people are watching on TV. I mean, our incident was live on BBC One, so that's where that was triggered. Obviously, there was other incidents going on at the time, which were everyone's priority. But again, that was a huge challenge for us as a club when you had kind of five or six different incidents all going on at the same time. Obviously, what we were doing to deal with those at an away ground, and obviously live on BBC, everyone's finished watching Saturday Kitchen, and then come along, and unfortunately, then rather than 300,000 people who are experts on whatever it is on Twitter, you've got 7 million people who are all passing comment and passing judgment, and actually, it's then cutting through that to go, let's actually address each of these individual areas, and we can't be the ones to solve society's ills. We're one football club. Let's look at it wider.
But as is often the case with a lot of these situations, unfortunately, it's very small minorities in very big groups of people. Do you try and speak to the broader fan base so that they can be more proactive in helping you make sure that these people are not a part of, let's say in that instance, a travelling support, and therefore a smaller number of supporters than maybe in the home stand? You don't tend to get it really in home stadiums. It's quite often in travelling fans.
Yeah.
But does that come down to the relationship you can also build with the majority of those fans to help them help you?
I think so, yeah. I mean, in terms of our ED&I committee, we've got members of fan groups. We've got members from our official supporters club who sits on there. So again, a lot of what we talk through, and that does include obviously planning for higher risk games where we know that there is a higher risk of incidents, normally away games. It's actually, that's part of the pre-planning work, so that actually that can get communicated out, so we can have common messages. But it's a difficult one because, again, it's one person, it could be one person or a small group of people. And we've found that when we've had incidents this year at the Den, it's been people who are not necessarily known to us as fans. It's maybe their first trip here, sometimes from elsewhere in the UK, elsewhere in Europe. And we've had a few incidents of things like that. And again, that is just people who've come to see the game based on their misconception of the club and what our fan base is, and then cause issues. And actually, it's all driven from there. But again, every stadium has a zero tolerance policy, and for us, that's so important because we need to. If there's 18,000 people and then there's one person being an idiot, the other 17,999 need to feel safe, and that's a big part of what we do.
I mean, it sounds like the fans actually are, looking historically compared to what it is now, this is way more progressive than they would ever be given credit for.
Oh, completely. And I think it's only when you see what goes on a match day, you see the fans, you talk to the fans, you realise that actually everyone's the same. It's like no one's any different. And actually, we've got fans from all different backgrounds, and actually you talk to them, and I've never felt so welcome. I mean, I wouldn't have come back for a second stint at the club had I not felt so welcome. And the fans are brilliant. It's a big part of what we do, and it's a big part of why everyone's so enthused to work here.
And the community you mentioned is such a huge part of it. The relationships that you're building there, why are they so important for the club?
I think you look at especially being a club in London, and the community does move and evolve probably more rapidly than anywhere else. And again, from working in a city in the southwest, you've got probably 10 generations who've lived pretty much within the same 2 or 3 streets and will probably live for another 10 generations. Whereas in London, obviously a lot of our historic fans would have been South London dock workers. A lot of them would have moved out to different parts of London, Kent, Essex, Surrey, wherever, all over the country. And actually new people move in. And again, because it's London, it's a younger city with people not spending as long there. So our community changes even every census that's undertaken. The makeup of our communities in Lewisham and Southwark change quite significantly, and it's how do we operate in there? Obviously, we're also we've got a number of deprived areas around. So what can we do as a football club using the brand of Millwall and Millwall Football Club and the Community Trust? What can we do in terms of assisting in those areas? So that could be through delivery of soccer camps. It always pains me calling it out.
Hello, America.
Yeah. Football.
Where does that come from?
I don't know. I think that must be from. I must be from being a kid, and obviously everyone going to Camp America and soccer camps. It's
Football camps.
But then it's things like school meal provisions. It's obviously work we've been doing with local schools. So it's so important, and that is just because it's the right thing to do. We are part of the community, and we should give back, and we should use the power of football to help people who are less able. So be that young people, be that for elderly people. So we've got a weekly coffee morning, and we've had those running since COVID. And it's a really important thing for people in the community to come in and actually just have a chat, have a coffee, have a couple of pastries. And it's a social thing. It's really important. But then widening that to go, well, what else can we do? How else can we integrate ourselves as much as possible in a community that isn't the same 300 families that it's been for 20, 30 years.
Yeah. What about, I should have asked this earlier when we were talking about players, but how influential is that academy in being a place for young people to, come and act out their love, gain the experience, hopefully make it to the top end of football?
Yeah, no, hugely important. And again, London's so competitive, and you'll have kids who live half a mile from the Den who'll be in Arsenal or Chelsea's academy system. So for us, having that footprint in, obviously we've got facilities at the Den in our community trust building, but also over at Blackheath, our academy centre, actually being right in the community is so important. Because again, if you're growing up, Romain Esse's great example, grew up in Deptford, which is a couple of miles from the Den and from Blackheath. He obviously joined us at 12, was all the way through till when he left to Crystal Palace earlier this year. But had we not had an academy site there that was convenient for him, getting a bus in or whatever it will be, would he have joined Charlton? Would he have joined Crystal Palace? Would he have gone to Leyton Orient? Who knows? And actually, it's so important to have that footprint in the community, because these kids live and breathe football. And if you can see the Den from your bedroom window, hopefully you've got aspirations to want to play there.
Is the competitiveness tough when there's so many options, there's so many clubs in London, local areas looking around it, for you to really get, the great talent, and you always want to have the best players coming through your academies?
You do. And I think you need to show the players that there is a development route for them, because if you're joining the academy on the basis of, don't worry, join the Millwall Academy, Man City always come in and hoover the best players up. So if you're good, you'll go to Man City. If that's the reputation you've got, you don't get the right relationship. But if you can then say, look, we've had a player who's come through at this age, played in the first team. We've had this many players make their debut this year who've been through our academy system. People can then look, if you're a family of a 13-year-old boy looking, going, well, actually, I can see somebody in the starting lineup who looks like me. Yeah. He's gone through my journey. Actually, there's that affiliation, which is so important. And I think it's one that you probably don't see in kind of the Cat 1 academies in the Premier League, because so few of them make it through. It's a hero story, isn't it? When you've got, and again, from working at Aston Villa, Jack Grealish comes through, absolute hero when he was at the club because he's come through the academy system. But there's one of those in a generation. You don't tend to see that as often. Whereas in the Championship and League One, League Two, a lot more, you see there is more of a flow through from the academy, and it's so important. But you need to make sure that you're getting the right people in who want to be in there. And part of that is giving them a reason to join you versus somebody else.
And I guess when you're a club that's so entrenched in its community, you always want that representation to be shown on the pitch on a Saturday.
Yeah. And you can see it. I mean, the fans absolutely idolised Romain when he played for us. And even when he was playing for Palace in the Cup, he went over and applauded the fans at the end. And he's come back to the Den a few times to watch games. And you can see there's that relationship.
It's rare to maintain a positive relationship, and after a move like that, I'd imagine.
Completely. I mean, you're playing in the Premier League. You're kind of, I suppose it's a world away, but actually there's that affiliation back with us as a club that's always going to be special to him. And I think probably for players, the club that they've been through as a child, it has a bigger affiliation than an employer that they join on a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year contract.
I just want to bring this all back. It's amazing talking about it in the context of Millwall, and obviously that's the speciality. But so much of this is influenced by wider football and some of the things that are going on affecting all of the clubs. And you look at the success you've had last season, and I imagine now what you've referenced you want to build on. How does the current structures of football, Premier League into Championship, parachute payments of clubs, being able to compete at that top level, how difficult is it to really compete in these levels when there is such a financial imbalance, shall we say? Oh,
it's hugely, hugely difficult, because again, you look at, especially the Championship up to the Premier League, you look at the clubs the last 2 or 3 years, it's been consistently 2 out of 3 are in receipt of parachute payments. And that makes it really difficult, because then you're hoping that you'll be that Luton Town type story, that you'll get promoted, or Ipswich Town last year. That's really difficult. We all know that's really difficult. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about the Football Governance Bill and the backstop powers and the regulator and all those things. I think we're all hopeful, but we also know that the Premier League will not be hoping for the same outcome as the EFL. The National League will not be hoping for the same outcome as the EFL. So I think it all depends on how good and efficient the regulator is. And I think until we see that in action, it's going to take a number of years to actually start working through. I think the big challenge will be the haves and have-not with the parachute payments. That is such an important tool to any club that's coming down. We saw it a couple of years ago. We did a quick bit of a fag packet calculation going into the new season. That's when I was here before. And we estimated that Southampton was starting $250 million better off than we were, because of the parachute payments, plus all the player sales they just made. And again, there'll be some payments to make on there, so it won't be a net $250 million, but that's a
$250 million.
Yeah. But then they had so many player sales through. Yeah. Again, they'd have to reinvest and buy new players, but it's not a bad place to start. I mean, I'm sure if we had $250 million, guaranteed revenue or income coming in through the door, we'd be pretty happy and pretty confident that we were going to go straight back up.
Well, if we go back to what we were talking about with the squad costs, let's just say rules, if they can claim revenue, let's just say of 250, it means that even under regulation, their spending power is significantly better.
Obviously, some of that would have been just transfer fees received, which wouldn't have necessarily been profit. But again, they'll be starting with a 5 times increase on central revenues than us because of their parachute payments. A lot of it will be how they're structured, I suppose, elsewhere in the business. And we also know this, and I know this from working in the Premier League. In the Championship, we have one person doing 3 jobs. In the Premier League, you'll have 20 people doing the 1 job. And you do naturally just start to just go, oh, we just need one person there. And I mean, when I got to Aston Villa, we had a finance team of 20, and they were brilliant. But did it need 20? I went to Gloucester Rugby. There was a finance team of 3. It was and we got everything out on the same deadlines. We got everything out to the same level of rigor. We got everything to the board. We had more board meetings, so there was more information than we produced. And you look and go, you cut your cloth accordingly. But a team of 20, that was naturally just expanding because of being in the Premier League. But actually, okay, there's more numbers. There's 40,000 people in rather than 15,000 people in. But at the same time, a sale's a sale. It's all from the same system. It's all one payment into a bank account. You don't need 5 times the amount of staff just to keep things ticking over on the same level.
But parachute payments aren't necessarily helping these clubs. One of the most concerning and damaging parts of football at the moment, which is consecutive seasons of all 3 promoted clubs getting relegated right back down. The sustainability of them as clubs in the Premier League is not assured at all. Now it's almost, I feel like there's a fear of spending when they get to the Premier League because we know how difficult it is to stay up. And if you come down with a massive, well, an even bigger cost base, that's not easy.
I agree to some extent, but I think this has been happening already for many years. If you look at Norwich City's business model of 10 years ago, that was all predicated on we'll get promoted, we won't overspend, and actually if we stay up, fantastic. If we go down, we will be able to get back up quickly because we've not overcommitted ourselves. And actually, it should be self-fulfilling that you then, it's obviously great when that does happen. But obviously, if you don't get back up into those promotion spots, then it is a challenge. But I think clubs have been doing that. I think what we're seeing is just the haves and have-nots even in the Premier League is starting to stretch out so much further than 15 years ago when I worked in the Premier League. It was a bit closer. And for us, we made a real stab at going for top 4 for 3 of the years I was there. We never made it. We had a few days in there again, but we spent as if we were a top 4 club. And then Man City happened and they spent as if they were a top 4 club. And all of a sudden, you've got 6 teams trying to spend top 4 money. And then the money into the new deal, into the Champions League and then the Europa League got so much more that all of a sudden you can't get there.
Yeah.
And then for us, it was like, well, let's settle for just below that level. And actually settling for just below that level, we dropped like a stone down the table. And it was really difficult then to correct things because it was structurally built in around the meritocracy and around if you're competing in Europe, how much of a difference it makes versus the clubs who are just trying to fight to survive. You look at the Premier League this year, it was 2 tables really, European football. But actually, I'd say 2 tables, 3 tables, because you had the 3 relegated clubs so far away from everyone else mid-season.
Lucky for Man U and Tottenham,
yeah. I mean, any other year they would have been relegated, but for the fact that it is now so much more difficult, and it's going to be a challenge for the 3 clubs going up. But at the same time, we all want them to be a success because we want to see that EFL clubs can go up there and can stand toe to toe and actually stay up there. And you look at the ones who've done it really well. Brighton, Brentford have got up there. Bournemouth, and not had to spend stupid amounts, but have done it in a different way. And again, I think that's what we're all trying to look at and go, how do we do that? How do we find a new, different way? Because the problem is people are doing different ways. And once everyone's doing the same different way, it's no longer a different way.
Do you have to fight the urge? Because we mentioned, many consecutive years in the Championship. And as with anything, you spend X amount of time somewhere, you're eventually going to get to the stage where you just go, come on, what's next? What's the next thing? The next thing for you is Premier League.
Yeah.
But to get there, we know how realistically you have to get there. Do you have to fight the urge to, should we say, compromise the good business or the better business that you're running with irresponsible promotion chasing exploits?
I'd say for us, no. I think we've got a very sensible structure in terms of our board and the ambitions they've got. Everyone is geared up. We will be there. That's that focus. But we do it our way. We do it in a sustainable way. We do not sell the family silver just for that one shot, because it's just going to come back and bite us if it doesn't happen. And I think you see too many stories where clubs do that. They do overstretch, and actually, if it pays off, brilliant. Wolves on promotion, what was it, 100 million lost the year they were promoted.
Ruben Neves.
The players they had were absolutely amazing, world-class players, Premier League players. But had they not got promoted, who knows what could have happened. Derby County under Frank Lampard, absolute brilliant players. I got to watch them in the playoff final against Villa, and got to see Villa go up. But again, Villa at that point, after spending almost going bankrupt,
to go up that year, didn't they? They had to go up.
It's one that you see where you do overstretch. You're never going to be able to compete if you then have to try and rein it back.
That's a very responsible, finance-driven answer.
Yes, it is.
Well done.
I've got splinters from sitting on the fence on that one.
No, it's great. It's great. Let's do a quick fire round if you're up for it. Yep. Finish off.
Go on.
So go on. Let's be nice. What's the best part of your job?
I think people, either the fans or the staff. Big part of why you come in and why you kind of wake up and love what you do.
Amazing. 3 p.m. blackout. Do you think it still benefits the system?
No, I think unfortunately people's fire sticks are far too good for it these days. So actually, let's look at how we kind of evolve it, because I think there's now a growing pressure to actually address that, because I'd rather we had a full stadium at 3:00 than having to play 2:00 on a Sunday afternoon.
Do you actually think the critique is always it takes away from the clubs? You're prime club to talk about it, I guess, with, because you're in London with a huge amount of competition for fans. Do you think it would take away, or the responses that you see from fans suggest that you'd have no issues with attendance?
No, I think we've got to make sure we keep delivering something that people want to come to. So that you've got you want to get down here early, you want to have a few drinks. Actually, we have an entertaining fan zone. The game's good. The atmosphere is good. There's some good entertainment. Actually, it's a day out. And if you can make it as enjoyable as you can, then you can't get that watching it at home on TV.
You've mentioned your mobile network, which is awesome. What's the next un-Millwall-y move that you want to make?
That's a good question. There's lots of things we've got in the pipeline.
That you can talk about.
Not a lot that are at fruition, but I think, watch this space. We'll be still trying things. And
are there any areas in football in general, if we take that out of Millwall, that you think are ripe for better practice, bit of technology?
I think it's connectivity in and around stadiums. We were talking about this before the podcast. We fully Wi-Fi enabled Kingsholm when I was there, but we couldn't commercialize it. And it was one of those things that it was an opportunity lost, because actually a fully Wi-Fi enabled stadium with super fast broadband that all 16,000 people could stream at the same time. What we actually was able to put was RefLink on everyone's mobile phone app so they could listen to the ref. People were able to gamble, and not gambling on rugby, which was disappointing. But the whole idea would be gearing up so that people could then use it to order food and drink, potentially in their seats. Obviously gambling, so that there was more engagement. But then how can we kind of improve that experience with Wi-Fi? That's something that you see stadiums doing. But the problem is we're doing it as this is a really good idea, full stop, rather than how do we commercialize it so that actually it's an enhancement to people on a match day, rather than you can now stream Sky Sports News and see what the other scores are.
We've talked about, we actually haven't mentioned it specifically, but we've danced around it with wages and transfer fees and inflation being, an issue in the business of football, whether it's squad control cost caps, whether it's salary cost caps. What do you think is the best way that we could handle this issue? I
think from working under a couple of different regimes, and again, we had cost caps in Formula E, we had salary caps in rugby. I like salary caps. When we were looking at it during COVID, I helped the EFL on some thoughts and feedback on where it doesn't work, but actually it creates a more level playing field. And I think actually it's a good way of bringing in a little bit of discipline the problem is that goes against other forms of competitiveness, and that has to be brought in across the whole of football rather than one league doing it. You just look at everyone, and rugby is a good example. Quite strict salary cap now in Premiership rugby, so players leave to go to France because the cap's a lot looser, so it means that the earning potential is higher. So it has to be a structural thing that is brought down across all of sport.
It's hard though, isn't it? I always look at it. We've had Maheta Malanga on, so PFA CEO. Naturally the union of players is not keen for salary caps, but and I understand it. There's always going to be the argument around that. But if you enforce it through something like the squad cost controls, and you can only spend 85%, it's a unlabeled salary cap that you're placing, right?
Of course it is. And I think it needs to reward and recognise talent. It needs to not be too prohibitive. But at the same time, for everyone, if it's a case of, well, we go unregulated and we go unchecked and people still keep spending, it's short-term gain and it's going to be long-term pain because we'll see more clubs struggling. That naturally then the market will control itself. And actually, if we found 10 clubs struggling in the championship, that will push everyone's wages down because everyone, and you see that in rugby union, obviously 3 clubs going bust out the 13. That has had a negative impact on salaries because there's more players, there's less clubs. We don't want that. That would be disastrous for sport in general if everyone was then all of a sudden having to, I suppose, wind back 20, 30 years of growth of the sport.
Go on. Finally, let's excite the fans. How are you approaching next season? What are the changes that you're making to really make a really good push to build on the successes you've had this year?
Yeah, I think it's watch this space. Come the 31st of August, we'll have a really good squad. And I think that's the bit that excites us all. I think we've got some really good players that we're looking at, and I think they'll bring different benefits to the squad. So leadership, they'll bring different things around the areas we've identified as where we probably need to improve on. And I think we're going into it with our eyes wide open, which is exciting. I'm either going to look really happy at the end of August, or I'm going to look absolutely kind of browbeaten that we've not achieved it. But I think we're going in the right direction, and that's the bit that gets all of us excited.
Bookmark this. There you go.
Yeah, the words to live and die by.
Yeah, it's confidence, and that's what we like. Your eyes lit up as you said it, which is perfect. Look, Mark, it's brilliant. Thank you so much for coming in.
No, thank you for having me.
Having this chat is amazing. So, yeah, really appreciate it, and look forward to following how you guys get on.
Thank you.